Hi everybody, welcome to the UEA Nursing Podcast. My name's Joe Ellis-Gage and today we have another Meet the Lecturer episode and today we're with Teresa.
Hello Joe,
Hello.
nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. So we're going to chat to you about you and your role and your experience as a nurse and all of that kind of stuff, but can you just start with like a one sentence, two sentence introduction? Who are you and what's your role at the university?
Yeah, so my name's Teresa Johnson. I'm a children and young persons nurse and I work at the university as an associate professor for the children and young persons nursing programme. I work across both pre and post-reg education as well.
Yeah, brilliant. So you're you've got a finger in lots of pies. You're doing lots of pre-reg, post-reg, BSc and Masters.
That's right.
And you're a little bit everywhere.
Yes.
Good. Okay. So start right at the beginning. And it's always interesting to find out why and how you kind of got to where you got to today. So what first made you want to become a nurse?
So I didn't really have any aspiration to be a nurse as a child. We started studying sort of different career options when I was about 14 at school. And there were lots of different, visits that we could go on. And there was an opportunity to visit a local hospital, meet different people from different healthcare professions.
Yeah.
And it was a day trip away from school. And I'm going to be really honest, part of my reason was that it was a day trip away from school.
Yep.
So I went on a hospital visit for that reason. And then I actually did get quite inspired by what I experienced, what I was observing, and then all the different professions that I talked to on the day.
So not exclusively because you wanted to bunk off school and get a day off, but that was the initial sort of bit that prompted you to go.
It was part of the reason.
And then you enjoyed it and found it interesting at that point.
I enjoyed it, I got inspired, and then that meant I could become really focused on what I needed to do
to get to that point.
That career pathway.
So what did you see on that day that kind of drew you in, that didn't just sort of go over your head as a teenager, and like what is there anything in particular?
I think it was talking to nurses in particular, thinking about their experiences, what skills, knowledge, attributes they possessed, how they were really impacting on the health of people, of individuals. And I just got really inspired by what they were achieving in their day-to-day roles.
Yeah. And that would have been looking at not specifically children and young people's nurses, that was nursing in general.
Yeah, it was very broad overview of the different opportunities.
So you kind of went away inspired and then had to work out how you get from 14-year-old inspired to get there eventually, and what options and stuff to choose at GCSEs and all that kind of stuff, I guess, to go down that route.
Yeah, so I knew then what I needed to gain in my qualifications, and then I started looking at different opportunities about healthcare programs, nursing programs, where I might like to study, and I started doing some more reading around the profession, found out some more details. And
then where did you go on and do your training?
I trained at a big teaching hospital, Adam Brooks Hospital in Cambridge. I was really excited to get a place there.
Yeah.
Really happy to be in a really sort of specialist big teaching hospital.
Yeah.
I did the general style of training, so it was when the transition to Project 2000 was happening. So I actually trained on a very general nursing route. But my initial sort of pre-registered qualification was as an adult nurse.
Yeah. And was that just because that was the most natural route to go in, or had you not considered children's nursing at that point, or what?
I really wanted to do children's nursing, but there were very few courses in the country.
Yeah.
There was less courses available, and it would have meant living and working in London, which I didn't really feel would be the right decision for me at the time.
Yeah.
So I chose a much more general route. It did cover everything. I did do a children's placement during my training. I did some health visiting. I did some district nursing. I worked with children with learning disabilities.
So the structure of the course was a bit different, so you were still exposed to it.
Yeah, so I did experience all the different avenues and different specialisms of nursing.
And did you enjoy your training?
Yeah, it was. I did enjoy aspects of it more than others. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I really enjoyed emergency department and intensive care when I did that as a placement. And I really enjoyed anything to do with children and young people. So I had some maternity placements, as I said, children with learning disabilities, and then an acute children's ward as well. And I have to say, those two were my real standout experiences in my sort of program overall.
Yeah. Okay. So then, when you finished, what did you go and do next? What was your first sort of role as a qualified nurse?
So I knew I wanted to be an intensive care nurse from the very first day of my course.
Yep.
I just thought that's a really interesting specialism, and very technical, but also that ability to holistically care for one or two patients and the families. But it's quite difficult to go into intensive care as your first job. So I actually had a 6-month role in paediatric oncology. So I did actually work in a children's ward when I first qualified. There was a 6-month fixed contract, and it was in the hospital. It was in Adam Brooks again. So that was a nice transition from student to staff nurse. And because I knew I wanted to do intensive care, after 6 months, I then moved into an intensive care role at Papworth Hospital, which is a big cardiothoracic specialist hospital. And I worked in the cardiac intensive care unit, so mostly for adults over 16. I did that for 1 year. And because it was quite specialised and I wanted to get some more general intensive care experience, I then moved to the adult intensive care unit at the John Radcliffe in Oxford.
Oh, okay.
So that was sort of the continuation of my intensive care journey.
So a big move as well. So change of job, but change of location, the full works.
Yeah, I did everything at that stage.
Yeah. All because of the job opportunities were like that was what sort of drew you in, and you thought this will be a really good experience for me. And I got a bus one day and went to Oxford and had a look around, and it's got the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford again, it's got a really good reputation, and I had a look around there as well, and then thought, that's somewhere I could work. That's somewhere that's quite, again, inspiring to go and work. So I applied for the job and then was offered the adult intensive care job. And was intensive care all you kind of hoped it would be?
I absolutely loved intensive care. It was exactly what I'd imagined. And there's so many opportunities for nursing to develop. I did my specialist critical care diploma while I was working there. I also did a teaching and learning, like clinical qualification as well, because I always love supporting students. Yeah. So it's very much an area where you can really develop and learn so many different skills. So it was
it's not somewhere you can kind of be static when you go and start working there. You have to do lots of extra courses to learn lots of skills and develop, because there's so much going on there at one time.
Yeah, and it takes 2 to 3 years really as a registered nurse, I think, to become a really skilled intensive care nurse. It's a very...
That's interesting. That's something, because a lot of students will say after a placement that they liked it, but they still didn't really know what was going on. Or even as a newly qualified or a nurse that's been qualified a couple of years might still struggle. So actually to know that you've got to spend a couple of years there. They used to always say in our A&E department that the people at the sort of top of their game were the nurses who'd been there sort of 3 to 5 years. Yes. So they were established, but they were still like really engaged, really interested, still doing lots of learning. So similar thing, I suppose. Yeah. But you didn't stay there. So you went somewhere else.
No. So one night shift, there was, although it was an adult intensive care unit, we had an 8-year-old admitted to our adult intensive care unit. He was really severely injured in an accident, and various logistical reasons meant there wasn't a space for him in the children's intensive care unit. And he was too unstable to be transferred anywhere else. So he actually came to our adult intensive care unit, and everyone was really scared. And I just embraced the opportunity to care for him and his family. And it was a completely different experience.
And you've done some care of children, but not in that situation.
Not very much, and certainly with not really sick children that were incredibly sick in intensive care. So I really embraced the holistic nature of children, young persons nursing. I really enjoyed the interaction and the support with families, because often with adult patients in intensive care, the families are almost seen as a visitor. You visit your relative.
Yes.
Whereas with children, the family are an integral part of the team that helps care and nurture that child to recovery.
And when you're on shift, you might be stood within 6 foot of that family member all day long.
Absolutely. They're there all the time. And I looked after him for 2 night shifts. I absolutely embraced that opportunity. And after I'd done that, after those 2 shifts, one of the nurses came up to me and said, "You need to be a paediatric nurse," because everyone else was really hesitant about the experience of looking after him, and I just thrived on the experience of looking after a child, and I remember looking at them and thinking, yes, you're right. This is my time to move into paediatrics. So I walked up the corridor. This about a week later, not on the same shift. About a week later, I went up the corridor. The children's intensive care unit was just up the corridor. It was about 30 seconds away.
Yeah.
I went up and spoke to one of the sisters there, and I said, "I'm really interested. This is my experience so far. I'm really interested in transitioning into children's intensive care. What would you suggest?" And they just asked me to apply. And then within about 6 weeks, I was working in the children's intensive care unit.
Oh, brilliant. So you literally just moved down the hallway.
Yeah, all because of that inspiration I was given by that one child that I looked after.
Oh, interesting. And you enjoyed that move? Like it was the right choice?
Yeah, definitely the right choice. I stayed there for 5 years. I did my paediatric degree.
Yeah.
So I did my top up and my 1-year paediatric degree and became registered as a
And did you go off and do that separately, kind of full time for a year?
Yeah, I was given a paid. I was paid a salary to have a year to study.
Nice.
And go and do my children's nursing
which is what
qualification.
used to happen if people wanted to do sort of become dual qualified one way or the other.
Yeah. So I did that for a year. I was there for 5 years. I got promotion. I got promoted to what was an F grade then, which is sort of your senior band 6 sort of level. Yeah. So I really enjoyed that. I used to be in charge of the intensive care unit. On shift, you were the most senior nurse there, which is obviously, and you used to carry the bleep for the hospital. So any paediatric emergency in the hospital, you'd also respond to that. So it was a really, really responsible, sort of pressured role, but I really enjoyed that. And we used to do retrievals as well. So we used to go out to local hospitals and transfer sick children back to our intensive care unit.
So in trusts or areas that didn't have their own intensive care unit, you would be the team that would go out and collect them.
Yeah. So loved the experience.
Yeah.
And again, just got some really great memories of that experience.
Yeah. So you're 5 years on.
Yeah.
And you moved again.
Yeah. So I'd always wanted to work in another country.
Okay.
And after the experience I'd got, the qualifications that I got, it seemed like the right time to make that kind of ambition a reality. So I decided I would go to Australia, and I got a job in a children's intensive care unit in Australia, in Sydney. There's 2 big children's hospitals in Sydney. And I worked there for a year. So I had the opportunity to work in a very big, busy children's intensive care unit. It had 22 beds, which is really big for a children's ITU, and very different experience. They covered all specialisms. We had our own helipad. It was really intense and a really busy environment to work in.
And did you find it was, other than like the different sort of setup slightly, was it different working in Australia than the UK in other ways?
It was actually quite similar. I was expecting everything to be different.
Yeah.
But I think I was more reassured by the similarities than the differences.
Yeah.
In the healthcare and the way it worked and how you cared for people.
That's interesting.
How you cared for children. It was, more similarities than I was imagining, I guess.
Yeah.
I think I was expecting it
to be all completely different.
Really different, but it wasn't.
Yeah. And actually a lot of children's nurses, or not a lot, but I mean, it's an area of the world where you can go with a children's nurse's qualification and go and work. So we do often I've known quite a few people who've gone over there and either stayed or gone and done a year or two and then come back again. Yeah, which you can do, which is great.
Yeah.
So what did you do when you came back?
So I came back and I'd always had an interest in education and a practice development role and clinical education role was advertised at Adam Brooks Hospital in Cambridge, which is where I'd done my initial training. So it was a band 7 role and I applied for that and was offered that opportunity, and it covered all the paediatric areas. Okay,
so it wasn't just intensive care stuff,
no.
It was paediatrics in general.
Yeah, so I did paediatric wards, the outpatients, really enjoyed the experience. I I always tried to work 2 shifts a week that were clinical, and I used to work alongside the more junior nurses on shift, and I used to develop I would work alongside them when they were being in charge of the ward for the first time, or when they were taking a high dependency patient to develop their high dependency skills. So I used to have quite a focused sort of way of developing staff in practice. And I used to take on other roles, I used to have the paediatric bleep for the hospital.
So you left there as an adult nurse, working just in intensive care, and then came back quite a few years later as a senior paediatric nurse in an education role.
Yeah,
that must have been quite nice.
That was really it was almost like it was a little bit like coming home, I guess. It's really nice to have that connection and that link with your
and that was where
past.
And that's where you built up your kind of interest in teaching even more, and it's sort of education and supervision and all of that kind of stuff.
And I did that role for 5 years, so it was a really long time in that education role, and really interesting. I did do a secondment, so secondments are great because you can try out different things. I was actually seconded for 6 months to be a ward manager, so we set up a brand new children's assessment unit, and sort of day ward. And I was given the ward manager's sort of post to set that up, and I had 2 days notice.
And then where you went?
So I had an interview and a discussion about it on the Thursday, and the ward opened on the Monday. It was
How about
really
that? In go.
It was a little bit like that. So it was really, really quick kind of learning. But I think from that experience, I learned that my strength isn't in management, line management, staff management. I didn't want to go down the management sort of leadership
You enjoyed the clinical
route.
stuff too much.
I enjoy clinical too much, So I moved on from that role after a secondment.
But I mean, that's the joy of a secondment, isn't it? You can go and do it for a bit. If you like it, great. And if you don't, it's good experience, and you move back to where you were before, and you can kind of continue. So what did you go on and do after that?
So I'd always, in terms of advancing my career, I knew I didn't want to be a manager. So I looked into roles as an advanced nurse practitioner. And I thought that's a good pathway for me. I can stay clinical, but I can advance my career. I can
become
gain
more senior,
promotions, and become more senior, but also become more autonomous in my practice. So I applied for a paediatric cardiac advanced nurse practitioner role at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and it was working with children with congenital heart disease. We worked across the cardiac intensive care unit, the cardiac high dependency area, the children's cardiac ward. It's a highly specialised area, and we set up, within our role there, we set up a nurse-led clinic for children on certain medications that we could manage more remotely to save them having to come back to hospital lots of times and have lots of blood tests.
And you had a lot of people that would have travelled quite some distance to come and do that otherwise to get into Great Ormond Street.
So it was really varied, really specialist.
And you did your sort of training once you were there, alongside your role?
So it was a brand new role that was established, and we all had to do our masters. So we did a master's in paediatric advanced nurse practitioner roles and also some leadership. We had to do some leadership.
Because you're a senior post, so you have to, even if you're not a manager, you're still a leader.
Definitely. So we as a team, there was a very small team of us, but we did that sort of masters whilst we were working full time. So that was hard. It was hard to do a 5-year advanced practice masters whilst in a full time sort of.
And also, were you
job.
That's quite a specialist role, and you'd come from doing lots of different things, but none of them were specialist cardiac things. So were you kind of having to learn a lot of clinical stuff alongside it, or did you feel kind of confident in that before you got there?
I think I was confident because I'd worked in intensive care units where we did heart surgery on children. All of the ITUs I'd worked in.
So although it wasn't exclusively a cardiac unit, you'd had lots of exposure to it.
Yeah, I'd had lots of experience. So I had lots of specialist knowledge, really. And through my masters, I also did an advanced respiratory module. I did some advanced cardiac modules. So I did some quite specialist modules as well as other things, which are more general for nurse practitioners, like the independent prescribing qualification.
And did you enjoy studying again at that point?
I really enjoyed it, and it fitted with the role. It was,
the purpose of why you're doing that course, and it's all the learning is all really relevant to what you're doing.
Yeah, and you could see how the learning fitted into your gradual progression in your practice. So gradual becoming that autonomous practitioner and making those, more independent clinical decisions. We used to be able to make decisions if children were being discharged from intensive care independently. We used to be able to make decisions around different clinical procedures that a child might have.
Yeah, and that was still probably quite an evolving sort of role at that point. It wasn't that commonplace for there to be a nurse practitioners working to that higher level with that much autonomy.
It was very new, and it was great to be involved in developing the role as well as sort of working in a role as well.
Yeah. So thinking about that, you're kind of in that role. You're in a really highly sort of specialist area in the most well-known children's hospital that you can get to. How do you move on from that role? Like, at what point do you feel like you've done enough, or do you want to go elsewhere? Because it feels sometimes, I think, to outsiders that you kind of you're at your like pinnacle there, aren't you? So what do you do next? And obviously you've done something next because you're not there anymore.
No, so after 5 years, and I'd become fully qualified advanced nurse practitioner, I'd always had an interest in teaching and education, and part of being a nurse practitioner is you are also an educator of others. So I decided that I would explore an opportunity to develop as an educator. But I still wanted to work with children. So what I did is probably something a little bit different. I actually had a break from nursing and I became a secondary school science teacher.
So that's not what everyone's expecting you to say at this point.
No.
So that was you can see the logic behind it when you look at it like that.
Yeah.
You like education, you like working with children and young people, and you're quite well versed and knowledgeable about anatomy and the science side of things. But it is still a surprising move.
It was. And when I look back on it, at the time it seemed very logical. When I even reflect on it now, I'm thinking that was actually quite a radical move at the time. But it just felt like the right time to explore that. I wasn't ready to move into higher education. Working, with nursing programs in higher education. I still wanted that contact with children and young people. And I think being a teacher and having worked with children and teenagers in an education setting, it's actually helped my nursing career. Okay. Because I've worked with children in a very different capacity, in a very different setting. And I think that's quite a valuable experience. Yeah. So that to me was quite quite a different experience, but
worthwhile.
I enjoyed at the time while I
did anyone say to you at the time, what are you doing?
Yeah, lots of people. And then, but other people actually were like, wow, that's incredible. We need children to learn those science subjects to become our healthcare professionals of the future. And they said, you're going to be part of that.
Someone who's really knowledgeable and has experienced so much more that you can then go and sort of impart.
So some people actually got the decision I made and were really happy that I would be in that role. Yeah,
okay. And did you enjoy it as well as find you sort of talked about how it was sort of developed you and was really beneficial? Did you enjoy going full time into teaching?
I enjoyed the training, and then I enjoyed elements of teaching. So I really enjoyed the work I did with sixth formers. I think that was probably my last 2 years as a teacher, I predominantly worked with year 11 students doing sort of their final year of their GCSEs, their biology and chemistry. And then most of my role was working with sixth form. So I was really involved in those young people's development in terms of them. They were all thinking about their pathways and their career aspirations applying to university, supporting them with UCAS applications. So I just really enjoyed that aspect of teaching.
Yeah, okay. But somehow you've got to be at the university eventually. So how did that happen?
So I really miss nursing. I miss using all of my expertise, all of my experience that I'd gained. And as much as I was using elements of that to teach science, it wasn't the same. Yeah. So an opportunity came up at the University of East Anglia, and I made that move from education with children into higher education with adults on a nursing programme.
Which probably to everyone felt like a really logical move at that point, and no one was saying what you're doing because it makes sense.
No, it did make sense, and I was really happy to come back to nursing and be able to share and teach and educate.
Yeah,
and that was a really
the right
opportunity.
Move.
Yeah, definitely the right move. It was over 6 years ago now, so I've been.
So you've been here 6 years.
Yeah.
And what do you like about working at the university?
I really like the team we work in. I think we're a really cohesive team in the children and young persons nursing team, but also the wider professionals that we work with as well. And I think that comes across in how we develop and support our students. And I think we role model that sort of team working approach, that professionalism. I really like the variety. So I like teaching across pre-reg and post-reg. I'm able to I spend 1 day of my week working within the prescribing team. So I'm now supporting professionals who are now becoming prescribers. I like teaching postgraduates at master's level, as well as then supporting the pre-reg. So the variety.
It's really variety. There is a real variety than what you do, because probably as much as anybody I've spoken to, you've got a hand in lots of different places. Well, that's great. I mean, if that's what you like doing and it gives you a lot of variety, you've got to keep your brain knowing what job you're doing on what day and how you're applying it and what course you're with and what cohort you're doing, because it's quite busy.
It is really busy, but it all interlinks. It all links together. I don't just have certain days of the week where I do certain things. It all just overlaps.
All fits together somehow.
All throughout the week, really.
Yeah, good. Well, I think we've kind of found out lots about you and your career, and there'll be people who've watched, hopefully, who find that kind of inspirational and interesting, and other people who may already know you and not know the full ins and outs of your career, so they might come and ask you more questions about it. But thank you for coming in.
Okay.
Hopefully you've found this interesting. Please hit the like button. You can subscribe to find have alerts for other videos, and you can add any comments below if you've got any comments or questions. And thanks again.
Okay, thank you, Joe.